Hey, this is Miss Fritz, and we're going to talk about the cell membrane or the plasma membrane. The focus is going to be on the membrane itself today. We're not going to look at cell transport specifically with it. We're not going to focus on passive or active transport. This is just a focus on the membrane. So when we look at different types of cells, say a plant or animal cell, we have to start off by looking at the outermost layer. And when it comes to plant cells, what you see here in a peach color is the cell wall. And when it comes to plants, this outermost layer is made out of cellulose. It's a polysaccharide. It is a sugar, but it's a lot of fiber. This is the fiber that you need to eat that keeps things in your colon moving smoothly. You can find cell walls in fungi, and in that case it's made out of chitin, but as a rule, typically when I talk about cells, I'm talking about plant or animal cells of the eukaryotic variety. When we go to animal cells, though, they don't have a cell wall. We have a plasma membrane or a cell membrane, and this works to our benefit. Plants are very firm, that is to say they're very rigid, and we are, well, bendy and flexible. So as long as we have this plasma membrane on the outside, we are allowed to be able to do all those cool things it is that we do. Now, when I look at the cell membrane, also known as the plasma membrane, I have to look at its function, and the biggest one that I can give you is that it creates a barrier. And if you look at this top picture, it's a barrier between what is inside the cell and what is outside the cell. Now, when we talk about these in terms of fluid, whatever is inside the cell is intracellular, whereas what is outside the cell is extracellular. So it creates a barrier that protects everything inside the cell. It protects that intracellular structure, and it separates from the extracellular environment. The other thing that it does is it maintains permeability. And when I talk about permeability, I'm talking about whether or not something can pass through a substance. And for things that are permeable, that implicitly says that anything can pass through it. But when it comes to cells, that's not the case. Not everything can just waltz in. So we describe the cell membrane as being semi-permeable, or we say that it is selectively permeable. And that permeability is based on the size of whatever's trying to come through. Maybe it's the charge, whether it's positive or negative, or we can look at it whether it's polar or nonpolar, or concentration. And I don't mean concentration as in focus. I mean concentration as in the amount of solute within a solution. And that'll become important when we talk about cell transport. Now, things that I didn't mention in class, this provides a surface area for reactions to take place. And if you look at this plasma membrane at the top, that is a lot of surface area to work with. And it also has receptors for reactions. If you look around, you'll see a lot of things that are off the top, and these are receptors. These will allow cells to communicate with each other, and it also allows them to be identified, whether I'm talking about a blood type or the type of cell itself. These are the functions of the cell membrane: barrier, permeability, surface area for enzyme reactions. It has receptors for other reactions, and we need it for identification, and each one of these is important. Now, I apologize for all the text on this, but my question for it is, how does it work? So let's kind of look over here at the top. The scientific name for the cell membrane or the plasma membrane is a phospholipid bilayer, and what you see right here is a phospholipid. It has a phosphate head with two fatty acid tails. Now, a phosphate head is attracted to water, and our term is hydrophilic. We can say that it is a polar hydrophilic head, and then our fatty acid tails contain fat, so they repel water. So this is a hydrophobic tail that repels water. So our scientific name, phospholipid bilayer, means that there are two distinct layers of phospholipids. One faces the outside of the cell, the extracellular fluid, and the other one faces inside the cell, which is the intracellular fluid. When you see that it reads systolic fluid, just know that it's referring to the cytoplasm, which is made out of cytosol. Now, these phosphate heads are attracted to water. They are attracted to each other. And that's where a property of water cohesion comes into play. This is part of what allows them to be able to stick together. It makes it so these polar heads are attracted to one another, and it literally makes these membranes stick together. This is a part of what holds you together. Now, underneath it, we have those hydrophobic, nonpolar fatty acid tails. And the cool thing about this is they're constantly in motion. They are moving, but while they are doing that, they create a barrier, and that barrier is a fat-soluble layer. Oddly enough, fat-soluble things can kind of glide back and forth through them. It's a lot easier. And my fun fact of the day is that the membrane is constantly in motion. It is moving, and it's moving because of those fatty acid tails. So those phosphate heads, if I were to look down at the membrane, they swirl around one another, which is a very cool Harry Potter effect. And because it's constantly in motion, we describe it as a fluid effect. So if I'm looking down at these balls, they kind of look like mosaic tiles, but because they are in motion, we describe them as being fluid. So when people talk about the plasma membrane and they describe it in terms of a model called the fluid mosaic model. At any rate, this membrane is a barrier that creates permeability in allowing certain things to come in while keeping others out. Now, there are a couple of other details that go with this. These little green things that you see here and the blue ones that you see here, they are a combination of carbohydrates and other fatty substances or glycoproteins that will stick off the top of the membrane. And that's what I was saying. These are used for identification only. On the inside, you'll see these yellow ones. There are quite a few of them. This is cholesterol, and the cholesterol helps to maintain the integrity and the structure of the cell membrane. You do need this cholesterol. You don't need too much of it, and that's what we were talking about in class. You really do need to make healthy choices in terms of food and your diet. After all, you are what you eat. Now, we did say that some things are able to slide back and forth from the outside of the cell to the inside of the cell. These long whippy looking things like a whip-like tail, what you would see on a flagella, these are not flagella. This is actually part of the cytoskeleton, and it helps the cell to hold its shape, but it also keeps the organelles where they're supposed to be. It sort of works in concert with the cytoplasm for all those organelles to remain in position. But these tall blue ones that you see right here, these are protein channels. This is where you got to see my awesome breakdance and move in class. And they can't stay totally open all the time. If they did, it's a fully open door for what's outside the cell to come inside the cell. And sometimes that is a dangerous situation. So it can only open wide enough to allow certain things in while keeping others out. And sometimes the piece is too big and it won't necessarily fit. So these are all the details of what you need to know for the plasma membrane in terms of biology for my class. I hope this was helpful and have a great day.